Hello again. Okay, so I let my canvas dry and I got a little bit of green paint on there. Don't tell anybody, mine's a little messy. That's okay though, because we can make mistakes in this art process. So the next piece, what we're going to do is we're going to take our stencil and we're going to place it, I'm going to use a different stencil here. We're going to place it on top of our canvas. I had initially thought we could just paint over this. It's a little flimsy, so that's not going to work. So we're going to place it down and very gently with a pencil, we're going to work through tracing every single line. It might be a little bit slow and methodical, but perhaps you can think of it as a mindful activity. And then once you have your lines traced, it will look like this. And we have a thin brush. And with the darker color, we're going to use our thin brush to simply just paint over those lines. It requires some fine motor skills. Again, we are not going for perfection here. We're just going through the process. And so here's what mine looks like so far. If you want it to look a little bit more perfect, you might choose, instead of a small brush and paint, to use a Sharpie or a paint pen. Or you might even want to go over the thinner lines with the Sharpie and the paint pen. And your finished product will be a maze. And the idea is that when you look at that maze, it might help you just think about perspective and think about maybe places in your life where you're feeling stuck. And the maze might help you remember that you can look at it from a different perspective. If you can pull yourself above the maze to see out of the problem or above the problem, it might make it look more manageable. That's the idea. So now I want to spend a few minutes just introducing you to some of the thinking around the idea of perception / vision and looking versus seeing. This has been an emerging topic for a while. You might have remembered a few years ago of a very big internet phenomenon of the dress. And it's called #TheDress. If you don't know about it, look it up. Just type in #TheDress. And there was a dress that someone had taken a picture of. And for some reason, many people saw the dress as blue and black. And other people saw the dress as white and gold. And scientists still don't know exactly why many people see this dress as two different things. It turned out that it was taken in a strange lighting, which caused our visual field for some people to see it one way, some people to see it another way. That has sent scientists and biologists scrambling to recognize that there's a lot we don't know about vision, but there's a lot we do know and that we're learning about vision. Let's just start biologically with our eye. I think for many, many, many centuries, people thought of our eye as separate from our brain. What we're learning now is our retina is actually more a part of our brain than a part of our eye. And our brain spends a tremendous amount of energy visually processing information. And so as we are living in a very visual laden lives with screens, we spend much of our time looking but not seeing, which can be problematic for people like police officers or FBI agents or teachers or people in all different professions. And some art historians recognized that art and looking at art or seeing art could be a useful activity for some of these professions. And so I want to introduce you to two different ideas coming from two different groups of people, but also both of them are sort of creating the same kind of learning for people. One is an amazing book. This is by the author Amy Herman. She's an art historian, and she came up with a whole idea called visual intelligence. The other idea is a group of people that started an organization called Visual Thinking Strategies. And what both of these groups do is they bring people in to look at art and to sit in the uncomfortable place of looking at art for a while and starting to ask questions about it, starting to give opinions about it, One example is they do this at the Kemper Museum in Kansas City, and they bring medical students in to look at contemporary art. And I think many medical students are like, why would looking at art make me a better physician? And the answer is, when we can sit in the discomfort of nuance, not knowing what a piece of art might be about, and we start really looking and really looking and really looking and asking questions, and start to use our voice about what might be in this painting or sculpture, especially in the contemporary art world, it translates directly, at least in the Kemper Museum's program, into physicians being able to sit in the discomfort of nuance with their patients and start to find the comfort of using their voice to express their ideas and to see extra clues and extra things that might be happening. And so this type of learning, this visual thinking strategies and visual intelligence, is something that's sort of being like tested out with police officers, with FBI agents, with CIA agents. And the results are pretty remarkable, that when people go through the process of learning to look at art so that they can see more and take risks with what they think is happening, then it actually makes them better at assessing a situation quickly. And so I'll just give you a quick primer of the visual thinking strategies. They call it slowing down to, hold on a second, let me find my notes. 1 second. They call it the 4 A's: to assess, to analyze, to articulate, and to act, meaning to make a decision. And so if you can imagine a police officer spending time doing that with art, and then showing up at a crime scene and repeating that same process to assess, to analyze, to articulate, and to act, what they've noticed and what they've seen in the studies is that people can see things differently. In the therapy world, we would call that being more trauma-informed, that they can assess a situation and perhaps not pull out a gun or shoot somebody or do something, and they can create a different outcome. So this is sort of a growing phenomenon in the art history world. I would also like to introduce you to the work by a biologist named Eric Kandel, who happens to also be an avid art collector. He's best known for his work on memory of sea slugs, for which he won a Nobel Prize. He really advanced our understanding of memory. And he has also followed down this path in the past 15 or 20 years of saying, how does our memory influence how we see? And it's fascinating because there is a correlation. There are some cultures that have the same word for blue and green. They call it like blue-green, and that's the only vocabulary word they have for that color of the sea. I think it's a group of people that live in the South Pacific. And when they've done tests on seeing if they could create like color swatches from green to blue, it turns out that people who live in a culture that differentiate between green and blue as separate entities were able to do a better job at creating the continuum from green to blue than the people that only had one word for it. Fascinating, right? And so what we're learning about the human brain is that our perception often clouds our ability to see what is in front of us, and that we sometimes only see what we think we see, and it's our version of the truth. So 2 people might see a crime scene or might see something happen and see very different scenarios take place based on their life experience, based on their memory, based on their perception of things. And the idea of adding these extra elements into it really, truly can help us grow and start seeing instead of looking. And I really encourage you to watch some of the videos I'm going to send in a link along with this. It's fascinating. And I guess if we sum everything up, I'm just going to repeat everything I just shared in the past 10 minutes just to kind of stimulate you when you're thinking for the day. Going back to our original art plan is really all about perception, vision, memory, looking versus seeing, visual intelligence, visual thinking strategies, and a newer idea of how art can help us articulate that. And you might be asking, well, why art? I could look at anything. I could look at a tree. I could look at something else. What's interesting about art is when we have something like a famous painting, let's say from the 1500s, let's say a painting from the 1500s in Holland. When we start to ask questions and look at the lighting, look at what's in the objects in the painting, look at the costumes or the clothing that people were wearing, we do have historical markers to add in to know what was happening at the time. We do have historical markers to add in what the artist was painting and thinking about at the time. And so as people start to suggest what they think they see, we do have evidence to say, like, well, this is what you think, and this is actually what's really happening. And then the more details you see, the more we get to let you know you're on the right track. Part of the visual thinking strategies philosophy is to never disagree or tell people they're wrong, because everyone has different observations that are accurate because they're their observations. But when we get to add in the historical piece to it, it enhances our learning. So I could give an example. I don't have any paintings handy or images of paintings, but I will send you, please, please, please go on the video links. They're fascinating. But my hope is today that you walk away with your maze using it as a place to continue thinking and shift from looking to seeing, and using the extra layer of metaphor and our abilities to, as Homo sapiens, to imagine the world as it isn't, so that your maze, you can have the perception and then shifting it into a real life scenario of thinking of yourself, am I in the maze and stuck because I can't figure out which way to turn next? Can I put myself above the maze so I can see which way to turn next? And then put that idea back into a real world scenario to be like, okay, I'm gonna go above this to think above it. And I will end with a quote by Albert Einstein, who said, we can't solve a problem within the layer it was made. We have to go one step out. So if you think of yourself in the maze, it's very hard to solve the maze in the maze. We have to go one layer out to look above it to solve the maze. So I'll leave you with that. I hope you have a happy day, an excellent week. Next week, we'll explore the topic of creativity and creative blocks. I look forward to seeing you. Thank you.